What is going on? Prosperity Practice. Trying not to shout because it's still pretty early here in my neck of the woods, and walking around the neighborhood, just trying to get a sense of how vast our world is compared to when we sit inside. Sitting inside doing all the work that I have been doing, and sitting inside the house with the kids and the wife and family, while awesome, in the same token, at the same time, you want to take a look around at just how great the world is and how vast it is. And for me, and especially right now, it's a matter of taking a walk outside and taking the opportunity to take a look at that. I'm going to do a quote for you guys. I haven't done it for a while, and I figured this would just kind of get back in the saddle a little bit here. It's been kind of back and forth, and I think a big part of it's just been kind of ruminating, right? A big part about it has been ruminating and letting the seeds kind of grow, and the ideas of this process of how this has all kind of come to me, and how can I best share it with you so that you can benefit. And that's, ideally, how can you benefit is what I'm doing all this for. Morning, how are you? And so with that, I'm going to do this quote here, which I think is a little illuminating, right? We've got the opportunity to I'm doing great, bud. Thank you. We've got the opportunity to really apply who you are to your life, and that's something that I want to share with you. And this quote, right? We'll talk about it. It says, "Dear past, thank you for all the lessons. Dear future, I'm ready." Had a conversation. Well, I'll just kind of jump around this one a little bit. Never mind the overflight here. The idea is that life has prepared you for where you are today, in this moment. Life has prepared you for where you are in this moment, and I can illustrate that in one of the ways I can illustrate that for you is how I just got my most recent job, and how I was able to pull from everything that I had done, all the experiences that I had had, and how I was able to translate those experiences into something that was applicable to where I am today, to the job that I was jumping into. And in coupling with that is also the idea of how I followed kind of like my heart with a lot of these things. They talk about following your bliss or listening to your intuition with all of this. So while I'm in a pretty great place right now, a big part of it was following my intuition, or going after what I thought made the most sense to me at that time in my life. And doing those things really helped me to get where I am today. And those examples would be years ago, when we had our second kid on the way. Liam was on the way, and I'd been bartending for the most part, and I had to make the transition into something that made more sense for us with 2 children, that type of family, right? I had to do something that made more sense. And for me, I'd always enjoyed computer networking, and Linux, right? Linux, kind of command line computer work. And so I thought to myself, I had a couple opportunities. I said, all right, well, I can go the Microsoft route, but I was like, it was like kind of like everybody hated Microsoft at that point in time. Like it was like MS with the $sign. I was like, you know what? Why don't I go for something a little bit more complicated than that, and something else that's not going anywhere? And that was Cisco, right? Networking, computers. So I took the opportunity to take some courses and invest in myself, invest in what I thought would be a positive outcome. And while I did that, right after I finished up that class, had a lot of fun, met some really cool people. But doing that course, right after the course finished up, we got a call from the teacher, and the teacher was like, all right, well, Cisco reached out. They've got an entry-level job for anybody who's interested. I was like, you got to be kidding me. So, threw together application, or it wasn't even an application. I just threw together my resume, and I reached out to the person within 45 minutes. I was talking to this guy, Stuart, and, I took it from there. And picked up some other books and just continued to invest in myself and kind of followed kind of instincts. And going to the interview process, Stu's like, hey, I think you're in, unless something totally crazy happens, right? And then it turned out that he calls me back later because, you know what, somebody else interviewed, they were super great. You're going to have to interview with this other guy too. He's going to be the one kind of makes the ultimate decision. So, I just continue to research and look for people. And again, just kind of by instinct, followed up with some people and realized I found out who, my competitor was for the role. I actually talked to him, called him up. He turned out to be somebody from the class I was in. And I just wished them the best, right? And then that also meant that I had to continue to do my best in that scenario. And I researched who it was that I was going to be talking with. And these are all simple things that you're supposed to do, but it was more of a natural flow, especially at that point in time, because it was the first time I'd ever done it, and I didn't really have any guidance for it. So I just did that kind of naturally. And look, long story short, I was able to triple my income through that scenario, which was huge, right? But I did it in big part by, taking everything in the past and applying it to who I was then. And I've repeated that kind of process a couple of times, where in that time I tripled it. During that time, during that time, it's funny because even during that role, I was able to secure 30% raises within 2 years, simply by asking for them, right? Just by virtue of being confident enough to ask for them. That was doubled, and after a couple of years. And I'm not saying any of this to be boastful, but I just followed instincts, and I definitely worked hard, and I put all my effort and I put everything, my best foot forward during those roles. It was my ability to look, I'm still really good at Excel and databases, and I dabbled in PHP and websites, so I was able to harness all these things to create kind of custom solutions to the role and bring all of who I was into that space. Kind of fast forward, I had to go grab another role, but during that time I again invested in myself. I did real estate. I grabbed a real estate license and took that class and all the other stuff, and began to do cold calling. And that was really kind of eye-opening what those challenges looked like, and moving forward through that and learning the scripts and objection handling, and going to meet people, and kind of just working with people on a one-on-one basis with their personally their largest kind of investment in their lives, right? If you've never bought a house, then you understand how daunting it can be, and all the preparation it needs to go into it, let alone buying and or selling it, and getting the maximum for your investment. It was during this time that I figured out a process, right? I'd figured out, how do I use my CRM? How do I leverage that for my marketing materials? How do I, get out there and do customer outreach? And it comes up that a job that I really wanted, also just showed up through my past relationships, and I was able to make it through the interview process. And one of the final interviews of that whole thing, the VP of sales is like, well, what have you been up to? We had actually a past history. So what have you been up to? And I told him about doing the real estate bit and where I was and all that I'd been doing. And as it turned out, his dad was a real estate broker. His wife had just gotten his license. He knew everything that I was doing, and he also knew how it was going to translate into this other sales role. Now, look, you got a couple different ways you can take a look at this. And you could say, oh, well, you just kind of, you did the work, and you prepared, yes, and yes. But at the same time, I just kind of followed my heart. I just kind of, I let go of a few things that I've been holding on so tightly to, and I did what I thought was right at the right times, and so far it's paid off, right? But I've also come to understand that you can take just about anything in your past. You can take just about anything in your past and apply it to your current situation. So, dear past, thank you for all the lessons. Dear future, I'm ready. So what is it that your past has prepared you for? What are the stories, and how do they translate? How can those stories, so hopefully in those stories you understand, right? So how could those benefit you? What have you done? What have you done? What have you been through? What have you learned from the stories? And even if you just learned through the stories and haven't been able to apply them to your everyday life, start looking at how that can be possible. How could that be possible? And I think that's the important thing. When I was doing my father for the rest of his podcast, when I first got started, and I was doing some coaching calls, receiving coaching, one of the things was, it's like, oh, but my story, my backstory, it's like, hey, I came from this broken down, not even broken down, because when we go through it in ourselves, it's normal, right? When we grow up in any way, that's just all that we know. But every time you talk to somebody, like, oh, you had such a crazy life, how'd you even make it? You're like, dude, it's just how it happened. So I was trying to rely on this story that I had in my past and just be like, oh, that's the story, and here we are today. Well, how can you apply that going forward? My coach is like, hey, everybody's got a story. I'm like, you're right, dude. You know what I mean? Pulled the rug out from underneath my feet when I understood that everybody's got a story. Everybody's been through something. It doesn't really matter. You've all been through something. Question is, what are your takeaways from that something? How can you take that and apply it to tomorrow, right? How can you take a look at it today so that it benefits you for tomorrow? And that's, so, man, listen, if anybody needs to talk about that, reach out to me. How can you apply your story to tomorrow? And let's look at it. That's I think the beauty of talking with somebody to find out what that looks like for them. Because for me, I was too close to the source. Maybe you are too close to the source. You're too close to the trees to see the forest, right? How can you turn that into a big picture? And let's talk about that, because you've got a big picture for sure. It's just you need help and trying to see what that looks like for you. All right, guys, this is to your prosperity.